what kind of substance were you abusing then?
I was injecting heroin.
And how long back was this?
This is 1995.
So 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And drugs were easily available then back in colleges and schools in Pune?
Yeah, drugs are always easily available.
Why?
Because there is a huge market.
Typically, what is the reason why people get into these kind of addictions? What triggers generally people?
Some of the reasons that people get into addiction is low frustration tolerance, emotion regulation is not there, there is a mood factor. These are the reasons that lead them to try any kind of substance for the first time.
How exactly did you get out of it?
So, I was admitted in a center, and I have to mention that the stay was quite long. I spent a year. I needed that year of abstinence from everything to kind of get my thought process on track.
What's the process like for de-addiction for whatever it is?
So the process, I think the mental process that I went through first was denial that I don't have such a big problem. But I have known people, especially alcohol addicts, that they go to a temple, they wear a mala, Rudraksha mala, and next day they have stopped.
What are the types of recreational drugs that are coming out right now as a classification?
So, drugs are classified in three ways: stimulants, depressants, and hallucinogens. So, stimulants are like coffee, nicotine, and depressants are your alcohol, your cough syrups, your painkiller medicines, and heroin, which is my personal recommendation because I used it for a long time. Then third is the hallucinogen category, which is marijuana, charas, LSD, ecstasy, mushrooms. This is the hallucinogen category. I think drugs should all be legal.
Should all be legal?
All be legal. All drugs should be legal. I'm saying that particularly because the addict should not be punished criminally for using a drug.
Namaste and welcome to this episode of the Oddcast Show. On today's episode, we will be discussing the odd topic of addiction and de-addiction. To discuss this, we are joined by Indrajeet sir, who himself has been a drug abuser in his college days and is now helping people to come out of it in different ways through de-addiction centers that he owns and runs himself. Welcome to the show, sir.
And thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad that people like you are doing these kind of awareness programs because more than treatment, awareness is the key to deal with addiction. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming here. And I want to know from you to start off, what exactly is addiction?
So addiction is defined as having unmanageability in one or more areas of your life. So for example, if you're doing alcohol as a kid and your studies are suffering, so there is unmanageability in the education sector. So then that is addiction.
What is de-addiction then?
So de-addiction, simple term, is to stop the substance use and have manageability in your life. You can manage your life well. That is de-addiction.
Coming back to your story, Indrajeet bhai, you mentioned to me before we got recording that there are certain triggers that trigger a person to go into or to abuse a substance. So what was the trigger in your case? What happened in your case?
So there wasn't like a trigger, but there was curiosity. So a lot of friends were doing drugs and I wanted to try. So I just started, and first one does the damage.
That's it. First one always does the damage. And what kind of substance were you abusing then?
I was injecting heroin.
And how long back was this?
This is 1995.
So 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And drugs were easily available then back in colleges and schools in Pune?
Yeah, drugs are always easily available.
Why?
Because there is a huge market.
There is a huge market. But typically, what is the reason why people get into these kind of addictions? What triggers generally people?
Okay. This is my subjective personal opinion. Some of the reasons that people get into addiction is low frustration tolerance, emotion regulation is not there, there is a mood factor. These are the reasons that lead them to try any kind of substance for the first time. And when they try it, they feel relief that this problem that I mentioned is gone away, and hence the addiction happens.
You mentioned the definition of an addiction as being unable to manage your daily life in terms of your work, family, business, etc.
Correct.
All those things. Anything that gives you the inability to do this or leads you to be unable to do these things efficiently is what would you define as addiction, right?
Yes, correct. So, like a common example is having ADHD. I have attention deficit, and because of that, I'm not able to focus on my studies, and I'm struggling with my studies. And somebody introduces me to cocaine. So cocaine is like a stimulant, and when I am stimulated, my brain is stimulated, then the ADHD is in control, and I can focus.
Right. And since your incident that happened, or whatever happened with you 30 years ago, can you talk us through what happened? How did society treat you once they knew that you were addicted, you were a drug abuser, your family? Who helped you?
So, for example, if you're starting, say, any kind of drug use or alcohol use, you know that you are doing something wrong. So you know that you have to hide it from your family or friends. So you are able to hide it for some time, and then the addiction progresses. And when it has progressed, then friends, family find out. And after they find out, generally first is the advice that don't do drugs, it's bad for you. You already know that. So that advice comes. Then intervention happens in terms of other family members or an expert. But by that time, it's too late. You are already completely addicted and you don't want to stop your addiction. And then the only hope that the family has is have like a professional intervention.
Right.
For example, if your house is on fire, you call the fire brigade. So like that.
How exactly did you get out of it?
So I was admitted in a center, and I have to mention that the stay was quite long. I spent a year. I needed that year of abstinence from everything to kind of get my thought process on track.
How old were you when this happened exactly?
29.
Okay. And so what is the process like, since you being a patient and now you running the center?
Correct.
What is the process like for de-addiction for whatever it is?
So the process, I think the mental process that I went through first was denial, that I don't have such a big problem. So I was in denial of my problem. The other thing was that I felt that because I was the one going out buying drugs and doing it, so I thought that I had this pseudo control over myself. So I didn't need professional help. So dealing with that took some time.
But what does the center do?
The main thing that the center did was put me under lock and key. I couldn't act out on my will of doing drugs. So that forced abstinence was important for that cloud of drug use to settle.
Okay. Do you think that's the best way to do it?
Like, I'm not the expert, but it is one of the effective ways to do it. But I have known people, especially alcohol addicts, that they go to a temple, they wear a mala, Rudraksha mala, and next day they have stopped. So there is no such.
Okay, so basically the thing is, let's talk about video games first, because some people say it has its own downsides, and some people say it has a lot of benefits also. But the most common reaction for a parent who sees his kid being addicted to that video game is to lock it up. Now, managing that forced abstinence as a kid and as a 29-year-old are two very different ways of doing it. So the kid may not have that kind of maturity, but when he's forced to stay away from it, he may do other wrong things.
Okay.
Like he may do self-harm, he may harm somebody else in anger, he may harm the parents only in anger. It's a very common thing to hear nowadays.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to a parent, or if you are a parent, what would you do if your kid is addicted to a game or something?
Okay. I'm not a parent. At least I'm not aware if I'm a parent. But the main thing is to have the conversation with them and try to understand what led to this addiction. When you are playing a video game, you have sustained attention.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a high. To have that sustained attention. Sports people call it the flow. They are in the flow. And it's a very euphoric feeling. So that is why the kid is addicted to the game. Okay. Now, what is in his life? Only the parents can tell because it's subjective. What is in his life that is leading him to have this device only that gives him that feeling? What is absent? And if they can intervene in what is absent and try to provide that, then naturally this will reduce.
So another question I had here, Indrajit Bhai, is that there are triggers that put you into this kind of state or mental state.
Correct.
Where, usually people who go into drug abuse or alcohol abuse or these kind of substances where, they're abusing the substances, typically stem from some thing that's happened to them.
Correct.
Maybe they're lonely, they're depressed, they don't have friends, they've had to break up, there's so many issues that lead them to this.
Correct.
But then there are also so many people who also say that, okay, hey, I'm depressed, but I would rather go and play a sport. I would rather go and hike. I would, maybe start doing yoga. I'll start meditating instead. So there are those kinds of people also.
Correct.
So what is it that pushes most people into substance abuse instead of choosing these other paths where they can come out of their depression or their loneliness or whatever has triggered them to think about going into substance abuse by going into this direction rather than, going into a better way of, coming out of it by, probably, performing, picking up a musical instrument or painting or art or culture or, learning Kathak or Bharatnatyam. What stops, why is it so easy for someone to get into drugs?
Okay, so there was a research paper that was published. This was during a war, and mothers of a certain ethnicity, they were complaining that their babies, newborn babies, were crying a lot. And they come to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician notices that all these babies belong to a certain ethnicity, and only they are crying because the war was against them. So what they found out that because the mother was under stress, she passed on that stress to the child. And when these children grew up, they were more susceptible to addiction. The trigger could have been the breakup, the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one, anything. But the pre-existing condition was there with these people, and hence they turned to addiction rather than any sport or a musical instrument.
And what would be the stages of addiction? How would you put it up as a process?
So they classify it as a progressive disease. So in terms of stages, one is of use, that it's your birthday or it's some special occasion and you drink it and you enjoy the evening or the atmosphere or the company that you have.
Or the feeling also.
Or the feeling, definitely the feeling. And then it becomes abuse, that because you want that feeling, as you said, again and again, you keep correlating that feeling with the substance, that when I drink or do drugs, I feel this way. So you continue doing that. And because you continue, there is unmanageability in your life, with your relationships, with your finances, with your career. And in spite of this unmanageability, you continue addiction because it is associated with feeling good. And then it becomes abuse.
Right. 30 years ago, when you had your experience versus today, has drug abuse, alcohol abuse gone up, or has it remained same, or has it gone down? What's your view on that?
So, I think statistically it has gone up, and the kind of drugs that people are doing is different than what they were doing back then. So, for example, during my time, there was a lot of heroin use, which has drastically gone down now. But there are other drugs. It is replaced by MD, mephedrone. So people are trying different drugs.
Has there been any impact of culture, like westernization or culture from coming in from the West, that has influenced, enhanced drug abuse or alcohol abuse in India?
Definitely it has, because if you see all around us, there are a lot of restaurants. People now eat out. So when they eat out, they drink also. So that culture has definitely changed. The second thing, because in the West, marijuana is being legalized, it is seen as a legal this thing. So that use has increased, and acceptance of that use has also increased.
But marijuana was legal in India till 1986. And there was never any case of abuse of marijuana.
I think drugs should all be legal.
Should all be legal.
All be legal. All drugs should be legal. I'm saying that particularly because the addict should not be punished criminally for using a drug.
Okay, why
He
do you
needs
say that?
treatment. He doesn't need
Punishment.
What about the aftermath of that? For example, if I'm into drugs and I take it and then I go and do something, and it could be anything. I could harm someone. I could harm myself also. Like I could cause a car crash or something like that. Then what about that?
So I'm not saying that you should legalize all of those things are illegal. I'm saying that drug use and the addict who's already suffering, if you punish him, he's not going to get better. He needs treatment, not punishment. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Right.
And only in that context.
Right. And like you mentioned that the kind of drugs that people are doing nowadays are very different from what they were doing 30 years ago.
Correct.
So does that mean that the drug industry or the drug mafia, if I may, has become so sophisticated that newer and newer types of drugs are coming out? Because I heard that in Pune there was some party where even your whale puke was used as a drug to get high.
Correct.
So where is all this coming from? Who's doing all this research?
So designer drugs have always been a thing, and but designer drugs is a very niche market. The general drugs is the major consumer,
Which would be cocaine.
which would be cocaine, MD, marijuana.
All right. This is what you would classify as the regular drugs.
Yeah.
And Colorado is one of the states in the US that has legalized recreational use of drugs also. And they found that in year one of them legalizing all substances, the crime rate dropped by 55%. People were happier and healthier. The burden on the state exchequer, because healthcare is a state subject which is funded by the state over there, not like India, where you have to pay for your own medication or you have to go through it through insurance, where you have to pay a premium. There it's that the state takes care of all the healthcare. So they found a drastic reduction in the health exchequer, the money spent on healthcare in their state.
Okay.
So it sort of validates your point that all drugs should be made legal, because not only does it get taxed, it also brings money into the state exchequer. It also helps them reduce crime. It has also, and they've proved it. So do you think that India is ready for this kind of thing?
No, I think I was not clear when I said that drugs should be legal. I'm definitely not condoning drug use, recreational drug use. I'm just saying that the criminal part of using the drug should be stopped, the decriminalization. And in terms of recreational use of drugs, it's all nonsense. It's my personal opinion. There should be no recreational use of drugs. And I personally believe there is no medicinal effect of the drugs that are there in the market.
The argument against that is that in developed countries, so-called developed countries like the US, etc., and even in fact Thailand has now done it, where they've done a U-turn, where they had the death penalty for even carrying marijuana.
Correct.
They've gone around and turned around the whole thing and made it legal across the country. So my point here is that a lot of these countries, the argument that they're saying is that they're related to stress. Yo, I'm stressed, so I need to take a hit.
Correct.
Or I take a hit of cocaine, or I'll smoke a joint, or a blunt or something like that, is what generally the argument is. And then along comes the government, the federal government, and says, hey, we are okay with that. You are stressed, everyone's stressed, so to beat that stress or to bust that stress, use this and we'll tax it.
Correct.
So what do you think of that? The argument being stress.
The argument of stress is partly correct. People who are stressed, only they do drugs. If I am not stressed, I will not use any substance. That argument is okay. But in terms of recreational or taxing, and I have little political knowledge, but because Thailand is a signatory of the United Nations Human Rights Commission, they have to follow the guidelines that come from the US. That's why they are saying yes. But traditionally, culturally, their society doesn't accept drug use.
So, sir, since we've spoken about so many types of drugs that you've spoken about, what are the types of recreational drugs that are coming out right now as a classification?
So, drugs are classified in three ways: stimulants, depressants, and hallucinogens. So, stimulants are like coffee, nicotine. Then higher levels is MD, cocaine. Those are stimulants. These basically stimulate your mind. And depressants are your alcohol, your cough syrups, your painkiller medicines, and heroin, which is my personal recommendation because I used it for a long time. Then third is the hallucinogen category, which is marijuana, charas, LSD, ecstasy, mushrooms. This is the hallucinogen category. In treatment, hallucinogen category drugs are the most difficult to treat. So marijuana is more difficult to treat than heroin or cocaine.
What is MD exactly?
MD is mephedrone, which is basically a fertilizer, and it comes under the stimulant category.
Okay. There are many stats on the internet that show certain, I don't know if they're true or not, but is there any stat that shows that you are aware of that shows in which region of India is drug abuse the highest?
I don't know about government statistics, but we do a lot of work in the field on the ground. So according to me, the northeast states in India have the highest rate of drug use than other states.
Okay.
Really? But why the Northeast? Any particular reason?
Mainly it is border states, and a lot of chemical drugs are coming from the Burma side into the
Because
northeast.
Burma has that no man's land, na, the golden triangle.
Okay, yeah,
which
correct.
is between Burma, Thailand, and Laos.
Correct.
Where it's no man's land and it's
Correct.
controlled by the drug militia.
Yeah.
So probably that is one of the reasons. But there was also a movie called Udta Punjab that came out long back in India, where they basically said that, Punjab, the youth of Punjab are the ones who are the heaviest drug users in India or abusers in India.
Correct.
So while there's a movie on it, you're saying that Northeast is one of the contributors, but Punjab is also a border state.
Punjab has a problem, but I think, say for example, if you ask anyone which is the best burger you've had, they would say some local joint and you wouldn't know about it. But McDonald's is like a very famous burger. So Punjab is something like that, like a good marketing thing. That's why they have become very famous that.
All right. But just because the drugs are easily available across the border or they're coming into your city or state and infiltrating your schools and colleges, that would not be the only reason why they are being the highest in terms of consumption, right? There must be some other triggers.
So basically, Northeast in terms of development is completely neglected. There is hardly any employment opportunities. Also, the local culture has been destroyed and they follow a certain different foreign culture now or a foreign religion. That's what I feel has been one of the main reasons, because most of these were tribals and they were following their own culture, and now it's been completely destroyed. So their way of living has been destroyed.
Right.
If a 16-year-old person who has never smoked before was to start smoking now and he takes only 2 puffs, which one is more harmful, first or second?
The first one.
Why?
The first one does the damage. In terms of the feeling, in terms of addiction, the first one does the damage.
Because I have got the exact opposite answer where people say second one is more harmful, because the first one, from what I've seen in movies and what people react normally, is the first one makes them cough a lot. So people hate it. But then they say the second one is like heaven. So this is the narrative that they have made. Is it really true?
So I would ask these people a counter question. If the first one was a negative experience,
Then why are you
what
doing it
made
again?
they
Exactly.
them do the second one?
That's what I'm trying to say, right? People are making a narrative. I don't know if it's a narrative or what, but they are saying that the second one is better. And that's what they do for a lot of things, right? Even if it's a show on Netflix, and people don't like it at the start, they'll say, oh, just keep watching it, it becomes better. So the same thing they're applying over here. So what would you say to them who are being peer pressured, I'd say, into doing certain things like this?
Okay, I don't know about peer pressure, but I think the pre-existing conditions that made them try the first one is the issue rather than the how they got addicted, which was the better.
You mean the addiction has already started before you have tried the
Yeah, the
substance,
addiction is the
just by the
pre-existing
thought?
condition. Addiction is a pre-existing condition.
So you mean just the thought of it itself is also addiction? That you want to try this?
No, I wouldn't say thought.
So what
but
is the
action.
pre-existing condition there?
So the pre-existing condition would be lack of emotion regulation, low frustration tolerance, mood factor, a lot of mood swings. So these preconditions when someone has, and then they are introduced to a substance, it's like a treatment for that condition, and that's why they get addicted.
If you were to start a school right now, not a de-addiction center, school where you're teaching certain things, the system may be a different thing. What would you implicate from your practice in that school so that people don't grow up and do wrong things?
Okay, so resilience training.
How?
Resilience, emotional resilience, rejection sensitivity. I would work on rejection sensitivity a lot, frustration tolerance a lot. I would work on these factors.
How exactly would you do that?
How? Okay. Okay, so for example, resilience. And it could start with the physical resilience first, and then move towards the mental resilience. So physical resilience, if someone is not able to do 5 push-ups, then you get them to do those 5 push-ups. And because the physiology is following, the psychology will also follow.
I had a question where you mentioned that you are currently running a de-addiction center in Pune.
Yeah.
And you're treating people of all age groups, all types of people. Are there girls also who come for de-addiction?
Yes, definitely. Girls are there. And nowadays, because of awareness, girls seek treatment more openly than before.
Right. And what's the percentage here in terms of, let's say, 100 people come into your center in a year? How many leave and are completely de-addicted? How many go back to their addiction? And is it different between girls and boys?
So the success rate for de-addiction is very low. It's 3%.
Oh.
And 97 out of the 197 will go back to their drug use.
Just for boys or girls?
Boys mainly. Girls, the success rate is really low. It's like 0.5%.
Why do you think that is?
The reason is because some of the things that happen to them or they do during their addiction, to get over that guilt without substance use is difficult.
Right.
What kind of things?
So for example, say somebody has used their body to procure drugs. And then to think about that after you've stopped drugs and to get over that guilt is really difficult.
But on the flip side, the boys, where does one get access to money to buy these drugs? What do boys typically, or people, kids, who want to get into drugs or they've got into drugs and they need money to buy drugs because drugs are not cheap.
Correct.
What do they do? Do they steal? What levels do they go to?
So there is a progression to that. So initially it is doing out of their pocket money. Then it is taking extra money under some pretext from the family that I want to buy 1,000 rupees t-shirt, but you end up buying 500 rupees t-shirt, 500 you use for the drug use. Then it starts borrowing from friends. Then conning people. Telling them my father is ill, my bike is damaged, these kind of things. And then it progresses to stealing.
Stealing at home.
Stealing at home and then stealing outside.
All right. What was your own example? I mean, are you comfortable to talk about it?
Yeah, the same thing. Initially, when I started using drugs, my family didn't know I was doing drugs, and they would give money whenever I asked for something. And then when I needed more money than I usually got, then I had to give excuses that this fee I have to pay, I have to go to this place. So I started giving excuses to take that extra money. But when they came to know that these are all excuses or lies, then they stopped that money. So then it started with borrowing from friends, family members. I would go to my aunt's house, give some excuse, borrow money. Then everybody came to know that he is into a habit of asking money because I think he's doing something wrong. Till that time, the drug use was not, they were not aware of the drug use. But then they realized that if he's asking for so much money, there must be something wrong. Then they found out that I was doing drugs. Then everyone shut up from me. So if I'm walking from this side of the road and my friend is coming from,
They would ignore, avoid.
yeah, they would avoid me. So then I slowly started stealing from home, then started selling things that were at home. And then it's progressed to shoplifting. Then
Petty
from,
crimes.
Petty crimes. And then it became two little
Bad.
bigger crimes.
Became worse.
Yeah. So because prescription drugs were not given freely, so one day we just decided that if they are not giving it to us, we'll just break the medical store.
And just steal it.
Yeah, steal. So we just broke the medical store and we stole the.
So all this happened in your lifetime at a very early age.
Yes.
Finally, what made you agree or what made you go in the direction of seeking rehab?
Correct.
What happened?
So what happens when your substance use, drug use progresses, all areas of your life become unmanageable. My education stopped. Money though was not available only. So because no education, there was no career, there was no friends, there was definitely no relations. So all the areas of my life were unmanageable. And because you are using drugs, you are obsessed with only one thing. Drug use, nothing else comes into the mind. So I thought Pune drugs are expensive, so I'll move to Mumbai. So in Pune, if heroin was 100 rupees, in Mumbai it was 50 rupees. So I decided I will relocate and my problems will get solved. And I relocated to Mumbai. I didn't know anyone. So I ended up living on the streets. I preferred living on the streets and doing drugs than stopping drugs.
That was the level that you had gone to.
So that is the kind of obsession happens.
So tell me a little bit of the thoughts that happen when you get addicted to a drug versus when you get addicted to something like a television program or something. Is there any difference?
Or a video game.
And or even a video game, that how does it affect you differently? Because the height that you've gone to over here that you spoke about, that you were more open to living on the street and doing drugs than to just leave drugs and live with your normal, comfortable life. But I mean, I've never seen that extent for people who are playing video games.
Okay.
So what is the difference like?
So I think the only difference is the theatrical difference. It sounds very movie-like, living on the streets and doing drugs. But with the TV also, the unmanageability is the same. Okay. If you are watching TV continuously, all areas of your life will get unmanageable. It's only that you are sitting in a room and it sounds acceptable. Okay, he's watching TV.
Okay.
That's the only difference.
Okay. What is your advice for some people who are just in their mid-teens, say 16, 17 years old, and they maybe are doing drugs, or maybe they are addicted to a video game, or they are addicted to watching some sort of material online, but they are not open to going to an addiction center, to a de-addiction center, or paying for it, or they are not ready to confront their parents. Can they solve the problem on their own?
So for any kind of problem, there is a scale.
Yeah.
So mild, moderate, and severe.
Say mild for argument's sake.
So if there is a mild problem, you can probably talk to your friends or find out what is leading to the, for example, it's drug use.
Yeah.
And say I have 2 friends with whom I do drugs. If I just leave that company and change my friend circle, the problem will go away if it is at mild level.
Okay. What if it's moderate, that everybody I know is doing that? Everybody I know, as in everybody in my friend circle is doing that, and I have no friends outside of that. Because of that image people have formed that Sued is doing this wrong thing. Then what?
But still, having friends is a choice. You have made that choice to have these kind of friends. You can make another choice and have a different kind, and have different kinds of friends. But still, if you're not able to do that, then you need to take like professional help, go to a counselor or a peer educator and talk to them and find out different ways.
In your case, like you mentioned that, it had reached an extreme where, you had relocated to a different city because you were under the assumption that the drugs are cheaper there.
Yeah, correct.
And you were also ready to stay on the streets. You preferred that because it would save you enough more. It would give you access to more money to buy more drugs. What happened after that? That what made you change your mind that yes, I need help and I need to go into rehab? Why did you go to rehab then?
That clarity, I think, never comes.
It never comes.
If it is serious. So they say for drug use, there are three ends: jails, institutions, or death. So, like I told you, I had been to a rehab. So institution had happened. Jail also happened. And quite a few times. But it never reformed me. And death was the last option. So instead of dying, then my family put me in a rehab.
So it was your family who intervened, but did they convince you or did they forcibly put you into rehab?
No. They forcibly put me into rehab because I didn't have that much insight.
Okay. And then in the rehab, apart from being confined against, and not being allowed to do anything against your will, was there any medical treatment also given to you? Any psychotic treatment given to you? Anything like that also?
So in the rehab, there is symptomatic treatment for withdrawals. So for example, when I stopped my drug use, I used to get fits. So they gave treatment for the fits. And because I had a lot of mood swings, then they gave treatment for that. I couldn't sleep. For almost 1.5, 2 months, I was not able to sleep at all. Means not even an hour.
Really?
Yeah. So they treated me for that also.
By medication?
By medication. So recovery, like how there is a suitcase with that lock. So all the three numbers have to come together for that suitcase to open. So recovery is like that. A few things have to come together for recovery to happen.
What are those few things?
So depends where you are on the scale, mild, moderate, severe. If you are severe, then the professional treatment is required. The family support, second, is required. And third, I think the societal understanding also is important.
Right. And you mentioned that the success rate in this is so low, especially for young men or males, is 3%. Like for every 100 people going into an addiction center, only 3 are walking out completely de-addicted. The remaining 97 go back to it. What was different in your case? How did you manage to stick on and remain de-addicted?
The main thing, I feel the long stay was a big contribution because I was in treatment for a whole year. That made a big difference. That was one. Second thing, recovery starts at home. Always. Family. If your family doesn't understand what is addiction or doesn't realize that this is an illness, and because it's an illness, it needs treatment, the family needs to understand that. So that was another factor. And third, I think there was some miracle that I'm not able to put my finger on that played a big part.
Somebody watching over you.
I think
your guardian angel.
Definitely.
So, sir, what is the financial implication or the cost of being a person who wants to get into de-addiction? How exactly does it?
So, because India is a really great country and we have very compassionate people here, without any government support, there are NGOs who are providing free treatment. And on the other spectrum, there are centers which provide all the facilities that you need, like air conditioning, swimming pool, modern massages. They charge 4 lakh a month. So we have this whole wide spectrum.
Okay. Before this, when I asked you a question, you were also saying that the treatment depends to a large extent on where the person is. Does he have a mild case, moderate case, severe case? So how does the cost vary within that?
So if it is a mild case, you can just talk to family, friends, well-wishers, and it can be dealt with. In a moderate case, you might have to go to a counselor. So a counseling session for an hour can cost anywhere between 700 to 3,000. Okay. And that could be once a week. And in the severe cases, you have to get into a facility.
Okay. You mentioned that all this is happening without the government support. What about the government support? Is the government involved in any of this?
Yeah, so the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment does a lot of work with de-addiction. They fund a lot of NGOs who are giving treatment to addicts. They also now, under the Modi government, have started a Nasha Mukt Bharat Abhiyan. And they are doing a lot of awareness programs. And one of the main things that is happening under the program is they are making the police personnel aware of addiction as an illness. So when police catch drug addicts, not the peddlers, the addicts, then they treat them differently. The police suggest the families to take him into a treatment center rather than locking him up. पहले ड्रग पैराफेनेलिया का केस बनता था. So if you didn't have drugs, but if you have a syringe or if you had a chillum in which you smoke ganja, there would be a case. But nowadays they have stopped doing that.
So they're looking at treatment and compassionate way of treating rather than locking the person up.
True.
Whatever you've spoken about is a reaction to what they're doing, right? They are reacting to their way of coming out of the drugs like that. But what about the prevention and awareness of it?
So about the awareness, the society needs to really wake up that awareness is the key. Because as I said, treatment only success rate is 3%. But the obstacles that we are facing in awareness is that when we approach colleges and tell them that we want to do a awareness program on addiction, they say no, because they fear that if we come into the college and talk about drugs and alcohol, kids will do drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
So that is the biggest obstacle.
That's the psyche.
Yeah.
So I hope that this show and a lot of people watch it and become aware, because this is also a medium of awareness. We're trying to create awareness on this.
So that would be like my public appeal, to do more and more awareness programs in school, colleges, society. You will find a lot of volunteers like me who would come and do the program for free. All you have to do is just reach out to us.
So Indrajeet ji, you mentioned during an earlier part of the show that hallucinogens, marijuana, for example, are very, very difficult or more difficult to treat, and in terms of cost, in terms of time frame, etc. All the factors that go into treatment. Why would you say that?
So one of the main factors is that people who abuse hallucinogen category drugs like marijuana, magic mushroom, LSD, they break touch with the reality. The touch with reality gets broken. They feel their consciousness is more aware, or they talk about spirituality, God, without actually understanding those subjects or even practicing them. And because of that break with reality, it's difficult to treat because there is no medicine for that.
Right. For example, a lot of people abroad and in India believe that marijuana or cannabis is associated with Lord Shiva.
Yeah.
And they misrepresented that, and they say that, okay, to reach Lord Shiva or to be one with him, I smoke weed.
Correct.
So that's completely wrong, right? I mean, like, there is no such thing in reality.
What is the problem over there is that the reason they associate with Lord Shiva is that when the Sagar Manthan happened and the poison came out, and Lord Shiva could only consume it. Of all the gods, only Lord Shiva could consume it. And then he consumed that poison and only he was able to survive. So it started with the tradition that whatever poisonous things that you have, you offer to Lord Shiva. So that's why there are temples of Lord Shiva where you give him alcohol, because you cannot consume it. Only he can digest. But it turned out to be that this is a prasad from Lord Shiva, and then people started.
So it was misrepresented that way, and then people started misusing it, right? Speaking about Lord Shiva, spirituality that you mentioned, what was ancient India's way of dealing with addiction? Was there any addiction then? Where does addiction stem from in the mind?
So I would like to give like a personal example.
Sure.
So we had a friend in the Gir forest, Gujarat, and we used to venture into the forest. And there we knew a sadhu, and just by being with him we could realize he's a great being. And there was a guy who was addicted to marijuana. With any kind of hallucinogen use, you get these powerful hallucinations that Lord Shiva is talking to you. You can see the whole world. And he had broken touch with reality completely. So, and we saw the sadhu treat him without the use of medicines, without the use of modern psychology. What he did was he asked him about his hallucination. So he told him that he sees a lady and the lady speaks to him in a very harsh tone. That was his hallucination. So 2 days he spent with him just asking about this lady. How old is she? What color is she? Do you see her in black and white or in color? Which language she speaks? After understanding all of this, he made him listen to some music. And then he told him that now, whenever you see the lady, you play this music. So her voice will go down with this music. And that's all he did. That's all. So whenever this guy used to hear this lady speak to him in a harsh tone, instead of getting disturbed, he would to play that music in his mind and that lady's voice would go down. The hallucination never went, but he became better. So this kind of intervention is unheard of in Western medicine or psychology.
Right. But going back to ancient India, I mean, like, do you have any knowledge on what it used to be then? Like, was there addiction there in ancient India in those times?
Addiction was always
there, right?
Addiction was always
So
there.
what were their methods of treating?
So, because addiction is termed as spiritual bankruptcy. When I say spiritual bankruptcy, is that addiction makes you very selfish, self-centered. You only think about yourself. And when you think about yourself, you tend to harm others. So you harm others with your thoughts, your speech, and your actions. So in the ancient times, there was this technique that you follow. You stop the 10 non-virtues. So 3 of the body that don't kill, no sexual misconduct, and no stealing. And then 3 of the mind, not to covet, not to have ill thoughts. And third, I forgot.
But these are values that were always there in ancient India. And I think that the deterioration of values over the years or over yugas, as they say, अभी हम कलयुग में हैं, तो अब तो सब कुछ बुरा ही हो रहा है. So these values are, I think, lost in that time frame.
Okay.
And that's what I think happened and that would probably be the reason why people are more spiritually bankrupt today versus yesterday. And that is why they are leaning more towards abusing substances, etc. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Correct. So, say for example, I'm a father and the phone rings. I tell my son, pick up the call and say no. Tell them no, I'm not there. So I'm passing on that thing that okay, it's okay to lie. Or I'm a father, I'm dropping my kid to school and I'm driving on the wrong side of the road. I'm breaking the signal. So I'm setting that precedent. Subconsciously, the child is noting everything that all these things my father is doing, so it's okay.
It's okay for me to do the same.
So then they just build on that.
Right. But again, coming back to spiritual bankruptcy, what would you attribute that to today? Why are people spiritually bankrupt today? Is it because of ego, lack of awareness, loss of values, a combination of all these factors?
If I had to focus on one thing, this is a complex question. There are many things. If I have to focus on one thing, it could be self-esteem. Because of the use of social media and all these factors, and we are connected to the whole world. So, for example, if we see somebody, say, driving a Bugatti, which is like 18 crores, 19 crores, and I'm driving a Maruti, my self-esteem kind of goes down. And when the self-esteem goes down, the ego goes up. And that is, I think, one of the contributing factors to some of the spiritual bankruptcy that we face nowadays.
Right. And any particular case in your life where you now feel that, I'm sure, like you mentioned during your journey when you were abusing and, where you were consuming drugs, you mentioned that, you would first started with stealing at home and then later on went out. And then you would have a complete apathy to anyone else. You became self-centered. Any such example you can give of being self-centered where you now realize that, okay, what I did was wrong and it didn't affect you then?
Yeah, so during drug use, there were like, I could narrate thousands of incidences of being self-centered. But the strange thing is, even after I stopped my drug use, I continued being self-centered and selfish, always thinking about myself and always thinking what I could get out of others for free.
So it was a behavior.
Yeah, behavior issue, perception issue, seeing the world like this, seeing the world from a consumer's eye, what I could get. And that continued. So I started my own HR firm after I stopped drugs, and I was like 3 years in recovery. And one day the office boy came late for work and I had an important meeting. So I was so furious with him and I could only think about myself. I locked him in the office that night and I went. So that kind of behavior continued in other aspects of life. In relationships also, if I was traveling with someone and they are having a different point of view than me, I would tell them, get out of my car, and I would drop them wherever they are. Doesn't matter where they are, what time it is. I've kicked people out of the car because they didn't agree to my point of view. So that
And any other case where have you harmed anyone or of that sort? Like, did you go to that level also in the past?
In the past, yes, to support my drug use, I have harmed people, organizations. But in my recovery, I don't know, the grace of God, I have not harmed others. At least intentionally, I have not harmed anyone.
So I have another question here, which is a little deep meaning question. You mentioned that, okay, we've been talking about addictions, where, one can get addicted to drugs, alcohol, smoking. You can become a workaholic. You're addicted to work also, we've heard of. Kids can get addicted to smartphones and video games, etc. and all that. Can love be an addiction?
First, you have to define love. And if you see love in the context now, that I want you and I want to possess you, and then you don't have any free will. If it is that kind of love, then definitely it can be addictive.
Right. But what about pure total love, as was there in the past, where you say that, okay, actual definition of love, if I may define it, is that I care for the person so much that all I want is that person's happiness.
Okay.
Then would that kind of love be termed as an addiction? And how would you de-addict from that?
So, like I said, the term addiction is defined as having unmanageability in different areas of life. So if I love someone, although it is, say, pure, but I am obsessed with this person, and because I am obsessed with this person, compulsively there are actions which is causing unmanageability, then it will be termed as addiction.
So Indrajit ji, in movies, etc., or whatever depictions that we see about rehab centers, we've generally seen that the person who goes in there for rehab is typically unhappy to first go in there, and while he's there, he becomes more unhappy because they restrain him, they tie the guy up, they beat him, and all. In movies I've seen, where he's screaming and shouting and bachao, and there are 4 ward boys hitting him and tying him down, etc. What is actually the truth? What happens? What's a day like in a rehab center?
So the unhappy part is the truth.
Absolutely.
People don't want to stop drugs, so they come unhappily. But what really happens is, first, when they come in after the assessment, there is a symptomatic treatment. So different individuals will get different psychological and physical withdrawals. Someone might get diarrhea, someone will have lack of sleep. So there is medication for that. And psychological also, someone might get angry, someone might cry. So for that, there are clinical psychologists who will address that aspect. And in almost all the rehabs, they deal with people with compassion, care, kindness, and empathy, just like any other illness. So if you break your hand and you go to a doctor, he will not shout at you, why did you break your hand? He will plaster you. There is a set treatment process, and people will follow that. So in the rehab also the same thing happens. So
there has to be compassion and empathy, of course.
Definitely.
Right.
Lots of it.
So I think our viewers are very, very blessed that, we have someone on the show who has been a drug abuser himself. Then he's gone to rehab, come out of it, a long rehab process that took place in your case. After that, you have actually seen life in a different way, where you've looked at building a business from scratch. You've done that also, and now you're also running a successful de-addiction center yourself. So what would your message be to people generally about drugs and about addiction?
Okay. So, addiction is also an illness, and illness needs treatment. You have to understand how healing happens. So, for example, if you have a fracture, you go to a doctor and he puts plaster, and you have to keep the plaster for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then he removes the plaster, and then you have to not lift heavy weights. You have to put that hand in a state of rest. So, what heals that bone is the state of rest. And the same technique applies to the mind. What heals the mind is a state of rest and isolation. And it takes time. For a bone to heal, it takes 4 to 6 weeks. For a mind to heal, it takes a little longer. So you have to have patience.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I would like to thank you for being on the show. And I think that what you've mentioned, what resonated with me on this show is that the reason a person goes into addiction is that they are spiritually bankrupt. And the reason that they become spiritually bankrupt is because they have too many desires and too many wants. And this was not the case earlier in ancient India, whereas it has become more prevalent now because of so many avenues to fulfill those desires. And as you fulfill them, there are newer desires that arise because of so many factors around us. And I think the key word is to be spiritually sufficient in the mind. I would say that would be one of the key preventives for getting into addiction, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming along and sharing this experience with us, your personal experience. It's very rare that a person of your what you've been through comes and talks openly about it and is ready to help others. So we, on behalf of all our viewers, are grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar. Thank you.